Today I am talking about the 3 things I learned attempting to build my own speaker cabinets. Number 1, follow directions, all directions. Number 2, don't rush. And the third thing I learned is, well, I kind of suck at building my own speaker cabinets.
Channel 33, RPM, yeah, 33, RPM, channel 33, RPM, yeah, final gear echo.
Shout out, big shout out to HiVi-Swans, I think that's how you pronounce it, HiVi-Swans, for sending me their 2.2A passive bookshelf speaker kit and setting me on this journey. Now, the build was a bit of a rough ride for me in spots, but this is not a reflection on the quality of the speakers or this kit. I blame myself. I blame myself for most of this, so please do check out the HiVi speaker kits. I will leave a link below this video because despite the things that went wrong, it was a fun journey and this is a cool project.
Channel 33, RPM.
The kit comes with almost everything needed to make 2 bookshelf speakers. That includes 6.5-inch woofers and 1-inch dome tweeters. The company promises easy assembly. In the box you have the speaker cabinets, the materials for the speaker cabinets, drivers, screws, wires, acoustic damping material, grill covers, crossovers, and other related electronic components. Some tools are required. The Amazon listing describes the speakers as fun to make and fun to use. The two-way speakers kit, the two-way kit, this kit sells for $249 US on Amazon. I'll throw up some of the technical specs here on the screen if you care to learn more. The reviews I read were generally pretty positive about this kit, so I was definitely intrigued. Let's get into this. Alright, the package arrived. It was really heavy, 42 pounds, and everything was double boxed. I was really happy to see that. And here, checking some of the stuff out, the first things out are the pre-cut materials needed to build the cabinets. This is all MDF. All other parts were boxed separately, including all the stuff to make the crossovers, cabinet grill, terminal boxes, wiring, vinyl veneer, cotton acoustic stuffing, and all the instructions. Instructions noted or suggested that the assemblers should have some basic tools, including wood clamps, wood glue, hammers, scissors, solder, and a soldering iron, sandpaper, and a few other things. I did have most of this except for the wood clamps, and I'll talk about how I got around that in a second. The first step was assembling the cabinets. This is where one of my first lessons comes in, and that is the importance of following instructions. Hey, sometimes I learn the hard way. What can I say? I pre-assembled all the pieces and was pleasantly surprised to see how well they fit together. A+ on that. Unfortunately, I didn't look closely enough at the instructions in terms of what direction each piece should be in, but more on that coming up. Once I had everything spread out, I used wood glue to start putting it together. The glue I selected was Gorilla Glue. You can see here I'm piecing everything together. As I mentioned, I did not have those wood clamps that the manufacturer suggested, but saw some videos where people kind of got around that using tape, so I purchased some of this yellow duct tape. Figured it was pretty strong and would do a good enough job at holding these pieces together, which it did. I was really pleasantly surprised. So I wrapped the tape all around the pieces to keep it together with help from my youngest daughter. Kind of need another pair of hands there. Oh, worked out really well. I did leave one side open and did the same thing on the second speaker. This is just so I could reach in there later and help, or I'd have more space to assemble everything. Then I did a dry fit of the final piece to make sure everything worked and all fit together, and it did mostly. You'll see my error coming up. Next was assembling the crossover, and this is where I learned that patience is important. This was my second lesson. I'm not a big electronics guy, so this was all new to me, but I gotta say the PCB was well laid out. I followed the diagram in the instructions to figure out what went where, and that was all pretty easy. Put the pins through the little holes, flip it around, and then solder them, and then cut off the excess feet or legs, whatever you want to call them. Then I soldered some speaker wire to the PCB. The soldering was messy, but I thought I got the job done. To be honest, this was, I think, the third time in my life I've ever tried to solder anything. Unfortunately, I later learned I rushed through this step a bit too quickly. I'll show you what happened. It's got to do with the speaker wire. I'll show you that in a second. I mentioned earlier that I also didn't read the directions well. Well, it turns out I assembled part of the cabinet incorrectly. So I tried piecing some stuff together here to see where I'm at, and I noticed I messed some things up. So here's this, and here's the wire for the rear. That's long enough, but I realized these are not long enough for the woofer and the tweeter, so I'm gonna have to resolder those and make them longer. Same thing on this one. I also noticed that there's these holes on the bottom, and you'll use those eventually to fasten this right here. Well, this one I did backwards. I put the holes on top rather than on the bottom, so I'm gonna have to get creative and make some new holes there. So swapping the speaker wire was no big deal. That was like 5 or 10 minutes of work, and I had a bunch of speaker wire kicking around the house, so no big deal. But again, this foreshadowed that, Frank, you gotta take things easy, you gotta go slow, I gotta read the instructions. The next step was adding the missing panels to the cabinets. It's worth mentioning again that the CNC machining on these pieces was excellent. Everything fit together perfectly. I left these overnight to set so the glue could dry. I didn't do it on camera, but I also tried to put on the provided vinyl veneer, but that didn't go so well. Check this out. Okay, it says sandpaper the panels smooth. Before you finish them, apply a thin layer of glue to wood veneer and paste on the enclosure. Press hard and evenly to make sure the veneer is flat and smooth. A piece of wrung hot wet cloth is recommended here to help make the veneer soft enough to be pasted evenly. I messed up here. I tried using wood glue, and it doesn't make any sense because this is a vinyl veneer, and of course it wouldn't stick. It wouldn't stick. Now this whole speaker front is covered in glue, but I think this was actually a blessing in disguise. I'm not a big fan of this thin veneer anyway. I think what I'm going to do is go to the woodworking store and buy some real wood veneer and make them look really nice. But before I do that, I think it makes sense to kind of clean these up and hook the speakers up to make sure they work. The next step was to attach the cloth to the front grills. Overall, that went pretty well. Again, I used Gorilla Glue. The cloth could probably be stretched out some more and made to look a little better, but this is something I can fix down the road. I'll be honest, at this point I was starting to get a bit frustrated with myself, so I didn't mess around and do more with the grill covers. Despite my frustrations, it did not stop me from continuing on. Next steps included adding the terminal boxes and soldering all those wires. Again, instructions stated when soldering the wiring at any point in the assembly just to make sure the polarity was correct. This was something I did check every step of the way, or I thought I did, and I may have messed it up. Stay tuned to learn more about that. I also added the acoustic damping material and screwed in the tweeters and the woofers. I figured this is starting to look pretty good. Some glue kind of spilt out here and there, but nothing terrible. All stuff that can be covered eventually with the veneer. I attached the grills, and things are pretty much done at this point, again, except for the veneer. The next step was to test these speakers, which I did off camera, but I hooked up the Aurilic amp I recently reviewed to these speakers and cranked it. Listened to some Spotify, and that's when I realized that things, unfortunately, had gone completely sideways. Initially, the speaker was working fine. This was working fine. This one, the tweeter was working, and the woofer wasn't working. So I took the woofer out, and then when I did, I don't know what happened. The whole speaker stopped working. The woofer still didn't work, and the tweeter stopped working. So, I mean, I wish I could have heard both together. I was proud of myself for getting one to work. There must be a loose connection somewhere in here. I gotta go back through it. If you're handy and you're into building things and looking for a fun project, I'm gonna leave a link to these speakers below because it is a fun project. I did have fun.
Despite my failure, it was fun. These are good speakers. Link below.
All right, 33ers, have you ever tried to make your own speaker cabinets? How did it go? Let me know in the comments below. Again, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, keep on spinning.